Hey guys, this is part 2 of factoring trinomials. In the previous lesson, we learned how to factor trinomials with all of the coefficients being positive. But what if you have some coefficients that are negative? In this video, I'm going to teach you how to do that. So let's get started. So if you didn't get a chance to check out the previous video, I'll give you a quick update. So in lesson 1 of factoring trinomials, we took all positive numbers, say for instance, x squared plus 6x plus 8. First of all, we learned that a trinomial is basically an algebraic expression with at least 3 terms or just 3 terms. So we have x squared 1, 6x 2, 8, 3. So this is a trinomial. And so also we learned that with all these coefficients being positive, when I get ready to factor out x squared plus 6x plus 8, what I can look at is what are two numbers that when I multiply them together, I get 8, but when I add them together, I get 6. So we have x plus 2, x plus 4. So we also learned the FOIL method in order to check to make sure that our multiplication was correct. So we learned that the FOIL method, which is multiplying binomials in order to get your trinomial, is using first, outside, inside, last. So what this means is when we look at the parentheses, the first numbers that we see in the parentheses are x's. So x times x is x squared. Then when we look at the outside of the parentheses, we have x and 4. So x times 4 is 4x. Then when we look at inside, we have 2 and x plus 2x. And then when we look at the last, we have 2 times 4, that's 8. When we combine like terms, we have x squared plus 4x and 2x. That gives us 6x plus 8. So we get back to our original problem. So this is using all positive coefficients. Now, what do I mean by coefficients? There's a 1 here. So here's 1 coefficient, 6, and 8. Coefficients are all the numbers in the problem. These are all positive. But what if they're negative? You're not going to have the same result. You're not going to be able to use the same tactic that we did with all positive numbers. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to have it where if they're a mixture of negative and positive numbers. So let's get started. Okay, so our first problem is x squared minus 10x plus 16. If you know me, you already know you need to write the problem down. You can't just look at a problem in order to solve it. You need to write it down and touch it every time that you work on it. That really helps you get it ingrained in your head on how to work these problems. So make sure that you're writing these problems down. So say we have this trinomial, x squared minus 10x plus 16. So we have a negative coefficient, which is negative 10, but we have a positive 16. So we know that it's going to be a binomial, usually, to factor out what this is. So we have x and x. But basically, we need a number where when you multiply the two numbers together, you get a positive 16. But when you add them together, you get a negative 10. So more than likely, both numbers are going to be negative. Because a negative times a negative gives you a positive, but then a negative plus a negative gives you a negative. So what two numbers that if you multiply the two, you get 16, but when you add the two, you get negative 10. So let's look at it. So if we were to look at 16, we could do negative 16 times negative 1, or negative 8 times a negative 2, or negative 4 times a negative 4. See where I'm going with this? So now we need two of these numbers to add up to negative 10. It looks like it's going to be the negative 8 and the negative 2. So our answer is x minus 8, x minus 2, x minus 8. Now, how can we check that? We're going to use our FOIL method to multiply these two. Back again. First, outside, inside, last. So when we look at the parentheses, the first expressions we see are x and x. So x times x is x squared. If we look at the outside of the parentheses, we have x times a negative 8, which is negative 8x. On the inside, we have negative 2 times x, which is negative 2x. And then for the last, we have negative 2 times a negative 8, which is a positive 16. So we have x squared, we combine like terms, minus 8x minus 2x is minus 10x. And then we have plus 16, which is our original problem. So this is a little different from the previous lesson where you had all positive coefficients. This is now where you have a negative coefficient and a positive coefficient. So what you want to do is, more than likely, if the middle number is negative, you're going to use negative numbers to add up to a negative number. But when you multiply two negative numbers, you're going to get your positive number. So let's do another problem. Okay, so our next problem is 21 minus 22m plus m squared. Now notice this isn't usually in the format that we're accustomed to, so we can turn this around to be m squared minus 22m plus 21. So here we have a negative coefficient, negative 22, and then another positive coefficient, 21. So basically, we have our two m's. So now we have to ask ourselves, what two numbers that when we multiply them, you get 21, but when you add them, you get negative 22. So let's look at 21. So with 21, you can have negative 7 times a negative 3, and that's about it. So now looking at these two, if we were to add negative 21 plus a negative 1, we would get our negative 22, so that's our answer. So this would be m minus 21, m minus 1. Now, how do we check that? In order to get back to our original problem, we're going to use the FOIL method. First, outside, inside, last. So when we look at our first numbers, we have, or our first expressions, we have, when we look at the expressions, we have m and negative 1. M times negative 1 is negative 1m. On the inside, we have negative 21 times m, which is negative 21m. And then last, we have negative 21 times negative 1, which is a positive 21. So we have m squared, combining like terms, minus 22m plus 21, which gives us our original problem. So that lets us know that the factors of m squared minus 22m plus 21 are m minus 21 and m minus 1. So let's do one more problem just to make sure you understand what you're doing. Okay, so our last problem is s squared minus 11s plus 28. When we get ready to factor, what two numbers that I multiply to get 28, but when I add them, I get negative 11. So with 28, we could have minus 7 times a negative 4, negative 28 times a negative 1. We could also have negative 2 times a negative 14. So what two numbers that we add up to get negative 11? Minus 14 minus 2 is negative 16, but negative 7 minus 4 gives us our negative 11. So we know that our answer is s minus 7, s minus 4. And then in order to check it, we're going to use our FOIL method, first, outside, inside, last, to multiply these two binomials together to see what the trinomial is. So our first is s times s, s squared. Our outside is s times -4, which is -4s. Our inside is -7 times s, which is -7s. And our last is -7 times -4, which is a positive 28. So we have s squared combining like terms, -4s plus a -7s gives us 11s plus 28, which is our original problem. So I hope this helps. If this helped you, pass it along to someone else, and we'll see you in the next video.